was a show of solidarity and discontent. Public service workers across South Africa heeded the call to down tools. Thousands of workers from across Gauteng streamed into the Johannesburg CBD to voice their anger. Government is the largest employer in South Africa and is being accused of unfair labor practices.
Our employer telling us that we cannot be permanent because of there is no permanent structures, but we are working from 8 to 8 at night. If we are dying as a lecturers, we are dying only our salary that we get. The last payment that when you die is the last salary that you get. Even that you are going to the pensioner is the only salary that you will get.
What's the use of going to work and earn 25 francs? It's better as we are here on the street. Because it's what we are fighting for. This is a struggle and there's no way we can give up now. Ramaphosa must know that come 2019, working class have watched him for so long. We are tired of ANC.
The minimum wage amounts to just over $1.60 per hour. Even though government has postponed the implementation of this policy, it's not clear whether the minimum wage will be increased. Proposed amendments to the Labour Relations Act that will make it harder for strike action has also angered workers. All government services from health, education, transport and home affairs were affected as striking workers sang and danced their way through the city streets.
It certainly wasn't a good day for business in the Johannesburg CBD. The city centre came to a virtual standstill as thousands of workers marched through these streets. Most businesses and schools in the area had to close for the day.
While the economic impact of the national stay-away is yet to be tallied, government will have to deal with demands for higher wages. Sumitra Nydoo, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And let's dig deep into the issues raised by that one-day strike. Sumitra Nydoo joins us now live from Johannesburg with more data on this. So, Sumitra, as I understand it, three of the biggest unions in the country, the Congress of South African Unions, COSATU, the Federation of Unions of South Africa, and the National Council of Trade Unions, they did not take part in this industrial action. Why is that?
Yes, that's right, Rama. There seems to be a bit of rivalry amongst the unions. In the case of COSATU, which has the largest membership of in South Africa, because it's a collective, it's it's twofold. It feels that SAFTU, which is led by Zwelithini Vavi, is trying to steal members. Of course, Vavi was the Secretary General of COSATU for a very long time and didn't leave on a good note. But the main issue here is that COSATU supports the national minimum wage, so it didn't actually agree with the merits of the strike action. COSATU believes the minimum wage will benefit the workers as it will see wages rise for up to 47% of workers. That's about 6 million people who earn less than 20 Rand an hour currently, or $1.60.
Indeed. So SAFTU is deeply opposed to this idea of raising the minimum wage to 20 Rands an hour. That's about $1.61 an hour. But what do they want that figure to rise to, and why?
Well, they feel that the figure is way too low, and as you saw in the responses I got from workers that were striking today, they feel it's an absolute insult, it's demeaning, and that they're worth more than that. They say that they work long hours, and with rising costs in the country, transport in particular, they're not making ends meet. $1.60 for them is paltry and just not enough. So they want this to increase across the board. They just feel that it's too low.
So after years of virtually no growth, because we've seen several years of about 1% or 2% growth in South Africa, can private sector firms, though, in the country afford these wage hikes? So is this minimum wage a number that doesn't really have a real effect, if you will, on average wages across the public sector and the private sector in South Africa?
Well, you know, Rama, this has been an argument for a long time, and we've heard Zwelithini Vavi for a long time as well, calling for CEOs in the private sector and government officials to have lifestyle orders. There is a massive disparity in South Africa, a massive gap between the rich and the poor. But the private sector says if it has to pay more, it will have to cut jobs to remain profitable. And this is not ideal in a country with one of the highest unemployment rates in the world. So the minimum, once the minimum wage does take effect, it will in some cases increase wages and wage inflation. inflation in the country. And this is because so many workers are currently being paid a lot lower than the $1.60 an hour, sadly. So, the other side of this was really to bring employers in line with legislation to protect employees that are being exploited, in areas like farming, for instance. These workers, in some cases have been exploited for many years. They're getting a lot less than that $1.60 an hour. And obviously they don't fall under the legislation. So this is really to bring people in line. It's more for protection as well.
Indeed. And of course, I should point out to our viewers that from the government's perspective, they say they've engaged with unions and employers for months before this proposal was made. One last question for you, Sumitra. So given these protests, we're seeing an increase in value-added tax coming through, about 100 basis points, I believe, a sky high in employment, that's over 27%. What are Cyril Ramaphosa's options here, especially given that the ANC has elections to face in 2019?
Well, he's definitely under pressure, and he simply, will need to deliver on all the promises he's made. He promised job creation, especially youth job creation, job summits, 1 million internships, investment summits to showcase South Africa to the international community. His speech in February at the State of the Nation was really focused on reviving and growing this economy. He's off to a good start. He's saying all the right things. We have managed to avoid further rating downgrades, and the projection for growth is looking better. But people are growing impatient. Even though it's still early days for the new president, people on the ground want action. In terms of VAT, the Treasury has appointed an independent team of experts to review the list of zero-rated items to see if more items can be added to that list, so it would effectively make all those items VAT-free. Really, the mission here is to find ways to mitigate the impact of the increase on poor households. But he may, Cyril Ramaphosa may need to take a hard line going forward, especially in government and with state-owned entities, trim the fat and cut back on the bailouts, because workers on the ground feel that there is plenty of money to go around here.
Indeed. And speaking of bailouts, I believe SAA was asking for about, $400 million earlier in the day. We'll leave it there for the time being. That's Sumitra Nydoo there live in Johannesburg.